They called him a dumb black kid, and they did it right in front of the entire third-grade class, leaving him paralyzed with anger and humiliation, a mixture of emotions swirling in his young mind that felt too big for his 9-year-old self to handle. But he just stood there, heart pounding, hands trembling, as Miss S. "Take your seat, Miss S.," Lancaster commanded, her voice betraying more exhaustion than genuine anger, and Tyler obeyed, slinking into his chair as if hoping it might swallow him whole, the skin on his neck prickling with the tension of all those eyes staring right through him, because not everyone joined in the cruel game, but almost no one stuck up for him either, and he felt very alone. That night, he went home, found his mom in the kitchen, working on a second batch of cookies to sell at the local bakery she did that after her shift at the hospital to earn extra money, and he hesitated to tell her about his day, but she sensed his mood from the moment he walked in, so she gently set down the mixing bowl and said, "Baby, something happened at school." She used that soft, comforting tone that always made him want to confess everything, but for some reason he felt tears rising again, so he turned away and mumbled, "It's nothing," but she wouldn't let it go. She wiped her hands on her apron and guided him to the small living room, where she sat on the couch with him and said, "Tell me," so he told her, stumbling over the words, fighting back sobs, sharing how Mrs. Lancaster had singled him out, and how his classmates had called him dumb, and how sometimes it felt like the whole system was stacked against him, and his mom, tears in her own eyes, just pulled him close and whispered, "Tyler, you're not dumb. You hear me, you are not dumb, and anyone who says otherwise doesn't know you, doesn't know your heart, doesn't know your mind. You're smart, you're capable, and I won't let you believe their lies." Tyler tried to believe her, tried to let her confidence in him wash away his doubts, but something about the way the teacher and those kids had looked at him stuck in his mind. So even as he nodded against his mother's chest, he still felt small, still felt the sting of that label, dumb black kid. Over the next few years, that label followed him like an unwanted shadow. In middle school, teachers would sometimes assume he needed extra help without even giving him a chance to show what he could do. Classmates would sidle up to him with that fake helpfulness, and some would even say, "Tyler, do you even get what's going on in math class?" As if it were a foregone conclusion that he was behind. One day in 7th grade, Mr. Olson, the new math teacher, announced the results of a quiz by handing back each student's paper, and when he got to Tyler, he paused dramatically before reading out the score, 85. Tyler's heart jumped because he'd studied hard for that quiz, determined to prove he wasn't the incompetent nobody they painted him to be. And 85 wasn't top of the class, but it was pretty good. However, Mr. Olson tapped the paper with his index finger, then said, "You should be happy with this. Tyler, much better than your usual performance, loud enough for the entire class to hear." That single sentence felt like a backhanded compliment, as though the teacher was implying that Tyler's usual performance was poor. And once again, Tyler felt the heat of embarrassment spread across his cheeks, especially as he saw a few kids smirk and whisper. When the bell rang, Tyler caught up with Mr. Olson and said, "Mr. Olson, I just wanted you to know I've been trying really hard." And the teacher responded with an odd look, something that mixed curiosity with a hint of condescension, and said, "Well, keep trying and maybe you'll surprise yourself," then turned and walked away, leaving Tyler standing there with a burning desire to scream that he wasn't a lost cause, that he had potential, but the words stuck in his throat again. When he went home that evening, he found his mother nodding off at the kitchen table, the exhaustion from her multiple jobs taking its toll, and he gently shook her awake. She rubbed her eyes, smiled at him, and asked, "How was school, baby?" He hesitated for a moment, wondering if telling her about Mr. Olson's remark would make things worse, but he finally said it was okay, deciding to spare her the extra worry. Instead, he hugged her and walked to his room, the thought echoing in his mind, I'll show them all." That single vow became his mantra. In 8th grade, Tyler started reading everything he could get his hands on, from science magazines to autobiographies of successful people. Late at night, he'd lie under a cheap lamp in his small room, scanning pages of library books about Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., Madam CJWALKR, and others who defied expectations. He grew fascinated with stories of perseverance, of people who rose from nothing to make something of themselves, and each story fanned the flames of his determination, fueling the idea that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't condemned to that label of dumb black kid. But still, the outside world refused to let him forget it. One afternoon, after basketball practice, Tyler had taken up basketball in hopes of finding a team dynamic that might build friendships he overheard. Two of his teammates, Lucas and Brent, laughing about him in the locker room. Lucas said, "He's all right on the court, but academically, he's basically hopeless." And Brent responded, "Yeah, coach probably only lets him play because he's got that speed. But come on, you've seen his grades, right? He's no rocket scientist." Tyler felt the rage boiling inside his chest as he heard them, and he slammed his locker door shut to let them know he was there. They jumped, startled, and Lucas stammered, "Oh, hey man, we were just, But Tyler didn't say a word. He just glared at them and stormed out. Walking home that day, he mulled over those words hopeless and not a rocket scientist, and he swore to himself that he was done being patient, done being the silent kid who took their insults. That night, he told his mom about it, and her face grew stern, lips pressing into a thin line. She cupped his chin and said, "Don't you ever let anyone else define you. You decide who you are. You understand me?" He nodded, tears in his eyes, that determination solidifying further. By the time Tyler reached high school, he'd cultivated a discipline in himself that few of his peers possessed. He made a promise. He would not let a single homework assignment go incomplete, not let a single test find him unprepared. In 9th grade, when he got an A in English for the first time, he came home and waved the paper proudly in front of his mom, who whooped and hollered, "That's my boy." Tyler laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. His teachers, especially a kind old woman named Miss S. Thompson, began to notice he was bright, inquisitive, always asking thoughtful questions, and often volunteering to help other classmates. Miss S. Thompson pulled him aside one day and said, "Tyler, you have a spark in you. I see it. Keep fanning that flame, and it will take you far." Tyler thanked her, and for a moment, he felt the unfamiliar yet thrilling sensation of being recognized for his mind instead of dismissed for his skin color or the mistakes of his childhood. However, not everyone shared Miss S. Thompson's view. Tyler had a counselor, Mr. Crane, who seemed to hold a dim perspective of his prospects. When Tyler went to him during sophomore year to discuss his dream of maybe going to a top college, Mr. Crane looked over his glasses and said, "Top colleges can be quite selective, Tyler. You may want to set more realistic goals, maybe look into community college or vocational training." Tyler felt the same hot flush of indignation creeping up his neck, the same fury he'd felt as a 3rd grader, and he asked, "Why would you say that?" "My grades have improved a lot. I'm near the top of my class." Mr. Crane shrugged dismissively and said, "I'm just advising you to be practical. A lot of students with your background find it challenging to adapt to those intense academic environments." And Tyler, bristling with anger, snapped, "What exactly do you mean by me background? You think because I'm black and grew up with less money, I can't handle the pressure?" Mr. Crane pursed his lips in a tight, condescending smile. "I didn't say that, Tyler, but sometimes the reality is that certain socioeconomic factors can impede success." Tyler saw red, but instead of yelling, he clenched his fists, took a deep breath, and said, "You'll see," before stalking out of the office. As he walked through the hallway, he could feel the weight of all those years of being called dumb pressing down on him, but now it fueled him like rocket fuel, igniting a desire to prove every doubter wrong. Over the next 2 years, Tyler transformed into a relentless academic competitor. He joined clubs, volunteered, took on leadership roles, and poured himself into advanced classes, often staying up until 2 or 3 in the morning to study. He became well known among his peers, not as the dumb black kid, but as the driven, outspoken, quick-witted junior who consistently challenged stereotypes. In history class, when the teacher asked for volunteers to debate historical events, Tyler would step up confidently, commanding the room with well-researched arguments. Classmates started murmuring things like, "Damn, Tyler knows his stuff," with a hint of respect rather than mockery. By senior year, he was elected president of the debate club and co-captain of the basketball team, balancing athletics and academics with an unrelenting fire. His mother beamed with pride, though the financial burden of applying to colleges loomed large. Nevertheless, with the help of Miss S. Thompson and some scholarship programs, Tyler applied to several prestigious universities. One evening, while he was sitting in the living room with his mother, flipping through channels aimlessly, the phone rang. He picked it up. "Hello, this is Dr. Hughes from Norton University's admissions department," a warm voice said, and Tyler's heart skipped a beat, because Norton was one of those big-name schools that Mr. Crane had basically told him not to bother with. Trying to steady his voice, he said, "Yes, this is Tyler, and Dr." Hughes continued, "I'm calling to congratulate you on your acceptance to Norton University. You have an impressive record, and we believe you'll be an excellent addition to our incoming freshman class." Tyler covered the mouthpiece for a second and mouthed, "Oh my God," to his mom, who looked at him wide-eyed, and he could barely choke out a thank you in response. After a short conversation, he hung up and relayed the news to his mother, who screamed with joy, hugging him tight, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "I knew you could do it, baby." Tyler hugged her back, feeling all the years of scorn and doubt evaporate in the warmth of that moment. Not long after, letters from other schools arrived, but Norton was the place that spoke most to Tyler's ambitions. On the day he went to Mr. Crane's office to share the news, the counselor just said, "Well, congratulations," in a subdued tone, but Tyler could see the mild surprise etched into the older man's expression, and in that moment, Tyler felt a sweet sense of vindication. Fast forward to Norton University. Tyler arrived on campus with little more than 2 suitcases and a head full of hope. He quickly realized that being accepted was just the first hurdle. The workload at Norton was monstrous, and the competition fierce. Some of his classmates came from elite prep schools, had traveled the world, had parents who were professors or professionals, and Tyler felt that old sense of inadequacy resurface. But remembering the vow he made to himself, he threw himself into the challenge, studying in the library until closing time, asking professors for extra office hours, forming study groups with classmates who sometimes initially underestimated him, but soon learned he was not to be dismissed. During a group project in his Introduction to Economics class, his group members seemed reluctant to let him take the lead, but he gently insisted, saying, "I've got a few ideas on how we can structure the presentation," and over time, as they saw the thoroughness of his research and the clarity of his arguments, they began to rely on him. After their final presentation scored the highest in the class, one of his group mates, a wealthy student named Spencer, pulled him aside and said, "Man, I didn't expect that from you. No offense." Tyler cocked an eyebrow, a little grin tugging at the corner of his mouth, and said, "Let me guess. Dumb black kid, right?" Spencer looked embarrassed and stammered, "Well, not exactly, just. I'm sorry for judging you. You're really smart," and Tyler smiled, offering a short nod. "Apology accepted," he said, leaving Spencer to mull over the lesson learned. Over the next 4 years, Tyler majored in business with a minor in computer science. He poured his energy into every project, every class, fueled by that same desire to prove the world wrong. One day, he stumbled upon a concept in his business innovation class that sparked a new idea, a digital platform that would streamline communication between small local businesses and their customers, focusing on personalized marketing and automated services. that big companies had, but small shops struggled with. For his senior thesis, Tyler developed a preliminary model of this platform, which he dubbed Local Connect, and pitched it to his professor, Dr. Ellison, who was known for being brutally honest. Dr. Ellison gazed at the prototypes and said, "Tyler, this is quite impressive. It's ambitious, too. Have you thought about pitching this to actual investors?" Tyler blinked in surprise. I never really thought they'd listen to me," he confessed, and Dr. Ellison smiled. "Don't let that stop you. With the right pitch, you might be surprised at who will listen." Encouraged, Tyler started refining his pitch, working late into the night on mock presentations, practicing in front of the mirror, in front of friends, occasionally even bribing them with pizza to sit through multiple rehearsals. When it came time to present at a small college entrepreneurship competition, Tyler's nerves threatened to get the better of him. He remembered standing backstage, knees shaking as he whispered to himself, "They used to call you dumb, but you've come this far, remember that." And he took a deep breath before stepping onto the stage. The lights blinded him momentarily as he faced a panel of local entrepreneurs, including a modestly famous tech angel investor named Gloria Warren. With a steady voice, he laid out his vision for Local Connect, explained the potential market, the revenue model, and the prototype's success in a small test run with local stores near campus. When he finished, the auditorium was quiet for a second. Tyler felt his heart sink, fearing the worst. Then applause broke out. Miss Warren asked, "What do you see as your biggest hurdle?" Tyler answered candidly, "Funding and scalability, getting enough resources to develop the platform for widespread use before a competitor beats us to it." Miss Warren nodded, exchanging a look with the other judges, and said, "Keep me updated on your progress. I'd like to have a talk with you after the event." Tyler left that stage with a sense of cautious hope. Sure enough, after the competition ended, Tyler placed second overall. Miss Warren approached him. "I think your idea has potential," she said, "but I want to see a more fleshed out plan. If you're willing to work on it over the next few months, I'd like to consider investing." Tyler almost couldn't contain his excitement. "Yes, absolutely, I'll work on it day and night if I have to," he promised. And he did. He graduated from Norton University with honors, receiving a business degree that he proudly dedicated to his mom, who sat in the front row during commencement, tears in her eyes as he walked across the stage to thunderous applause. Then, instead of immediately pursuing a corporate job, Tyler devoted himself full-time to building Local Connect, using a small seed investment from Miss Warren and another local angel investor. He managed to impress with his relentless determination. He recruited a few technically savvy friends from the computer science department, people who believed in his vision, and they worked out of a cramped apartment living room, coding through the night, fueled by cheap pizza and raw ambition. At times, they ran into roadblocks. The platform's initial design wasn't user-friendly enough. The marketing strategy needed more substance, and Tyler had to learn the nuances of leadership, how to keep his team motivated when funds were low and the future uncertain. But every time he felt that familiar sense of doubt creeping up, he remembered those nasty voices calling him a dumb black kid, and he channeled the anger and pain into pushing forward, refusing to let that label win. Within a year, Local Connect launched in a small pilot program with 10 local businesses in Tyler's hometown. Everything from a bakery to a barber shop, all run by hard-working folks who never had the time or resources to build sophisticated digital marketing campaigns. The results were encouraging. Store owners reported increased customer engagement, more repeat visits, and streamlined communication. Word started spreading through local media outlets, and soon other small businesses in nearby towns inquired about the platform. Miss Warren was impressed, increasing her investment and helping Tyler connect with bigger names in the investing world. With that extra push, Local Connect expanded, reaching a few dozen cities within 2 years, with hundreds of small businesses signing up, paying subscription fees that, while modest, accumulated into a growing revenue stream. By Tyler's mid-20s, he found himself in the position of needing a proper office, for his rapidly expanding team. He also found himself in need of more capital, and this time he pitched to a venture capital firm in a sleek downtown high-rise. The meeting was nerve-wracking. A boardroom of older, mostly white men who sized him up the moment he walked in. As he went through his pitch, now polished by years of practice, he noticed a few of them exchange skeptical glances, and he had a flashback to all those times teachers and classmates looked at him the same way. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach, but he pressed on, showing slides and data that proved Local Connect's potential. When he finished, the room was silent, and an older man named Philip Caldwell, the firm's senior partner, said, "You're obviously bright, and your platform shows promise, but what happens when bigger competitors roll out similar services? How do you defend your position?" Tyler launched into a detailed explanation of Local Connect's focus on hyperlocal data analytics and personal relationships with the merchants, emphasizing how they built trust and integrated community-building features that no big competitor could easily replicate. Caldwell nodded slowly, and though Tyler sensed some lingering reservations, it was enough to secure a follow-up meeting. Eventually, the firm invested a significant amount, enough to scale Local Connect to multiple states, which triggered a surge of sign-ups. The once small, cramped team of 5 working from a dingy living room grew to a staff of 50 in a modest but real office space, with departments for tech support, marketing, and product development. Tyler found himself at the helm, the CEO of a growing startup, constantly juggling responsibilities, from investor relations to day-to-day operations, from strategic vision to morale boosting. Late nights became the norm, and some days were so stressful he had to close the door to his office and breathe deeply, just to keep from cracking under the weight. Yet, whenever he felt that pressure about to crush him, he'd recall the disdain in the eyes of those who labeled him dumb or incompetent. One day, at a conference for tech startups, Tyler was invited to speak on a panel about empowering underserved communities through technology. He shared the stage with other successful entrepreneurs, some of whom had come from privileged backgrounds, and he felt a pang of imposter syndrome creeping in. But then the moderator asked each panelist to share a personal story about what inspired them. Tyler cleared his throat, looked out over the sizable crowd of young entrepreneurs, and said, "I was told most of my life that I didn't have what it takes, that I was just a dumb black kid who wouldn't amount to anything. For a long time, I believed them. But one day, it clicked for me that no one has the right to decide my future but me. And so every day, I remind myself of how far I've come, and I remind myself that the narrative others wrote for me was false. Now, I'm the CEO of Local Connect, and we're helping hundreds of small businesses thrive in an increasingly digital world. But I'm not done. I refuse to be done." The audience erupted in applause, and Tyler felt his chest swell with pride, not out of vanity, but because he realized that in sharing his story, he might be inspiring someone else who was told they couldn't succeed. After the panel, a teenage boy named Damien approached him, shyly admitting, "I kind of know what it's like to be told you're not good enough. Hearing your story made me feel better." And Tyler gave him a business card, saying, "Keep in touch, and remember, your story is yours to write." By Tyler's late 20s, Local Connect had grown into a multi-million-dollar enterprise, operating in dozens of states, with new features that helped small stores implement e-commerce, loyalty programs, and local partnerships. Bigger tech companies started noticing. Some even made acquisition offers, but Tyler always weighed them carefully, determined not to sell out too quickly or lose the company's community-focused mission. His mother, whose health had declined a bit due to years of hard work, finally got to retire. Tyler bought her a comfortable house and hired home care assistants so she could focus on enjoying life, reading, gardening, and traveling occasionally. One evening, Tyler visited her, and they sat in the living room of her new home, a far cry from the cramped apartment where he grew up. She looked around and said, "All this, it's like a dream." And Tyler gently took her hand and said, "It's real, Mom, and you deserve it. We deserve it." She grinned, pride lighting up her eyes. But Tyler still thought about those old memories, still heard those insults replaying like a broken record in the back of his mind. It wasn't that he was haunted by them in a negative sense anymore. They had become the grit that honed his blade, the reminder of how far he had come. One day, while flipping through financial news, Tyler spotted an article about his company. The headline read, "Local Connect: How a Dumb Black Kid from the Inner City Defied the Odds to Build a Tech Empire." He stared at it for a moment, feeling a strange mixture of anger and satisfaction. He wasn't comfortable with the phrase, "dumb black kid," emblazoned on a national financial publication, but there was a perverse thrill in seeing how the world was forced to acknowledge his success on his own terms. The article itself was mostly positive, highlighting his achievements and philanthropic efforts because Tyler had begun quietly investing in after-school programs in underserved neighborhoods, donating computers and mentoring future entrepreneurs, but it inevitably leaned on the sensational hook. Later that day, Tyler was sitting in his office, pondering a new marketing strategy, when an unexpected phone call came from none other than Philip Caldwell, the venture capitalist who had initially shown skepticism. Caldwell said, "Tyler, I read the article. Quite a journey you've had. I want to congratulate you." Tyler could almost hear the admission behind the man's guarded tone. Caldwell had been among the doubters, but now he had to acknowledge that Tyler was the real deal. Tyler responded graciously, "Thank you, Philip. I appreciate your support over the years." And Caldwell added, "Well, you've earned every bit of your success." After hanging up, Tyler looked at a framed photograph on his desk. It was him and his mother at his high school graduation, both of them beaming. He remembered all the negativity, the scornful eyes, the mockery that said he'd never be more than a statistic, and he felt a lump form in his throat, a mixture of pride and lingering sorrow for that little boy who had once stood in front of a classroom as they labeled him dumb. But the sorrow gave way to a fierce sense of triumph. A few weeks later, Tyler visited his old elementary school at the request of Miss S. Lancaster, who had ironically become the principal. She had invited him to speak at an assembly about perseverance and success. He wasn't entirely sure how he felt about seeing her again, given their past, but he believed in paying forward hope to kids who might be trapped in the same cycle of low expectations he had escaped. When he stepped into that familiar hallway, he was hit with a flood of memories: the chipped paint on the walls, the faint smell of chalk. He found Miss S. Lancaster in the principal's office. She looked older, her hair grayer, but she greeted him warmly. "Tyler, I'm so glad you could make it." He forced a polite smile, part of him still remembering the way she once dismissed him. She led him to the auditorium, which was packed with students from various grades, fidgeting and buzzing with excitement because a CEO was about to speak. Tyler took a seat on the stage, waiting for the principal's introduction, and as she spoke, he looked out over the crowd and saw many faces that reminded him of himself, wide-eyed, curious, maybe a bit unsure. Miss S. Lancaster concluded, "Please give a round of applause to Tyler Coleman, alumnus of this very school and CEO of Local Connect." The applause filled the room, and Tyler stepped to the microphone. He began simply, "When I was about your age, I stood right about where you are, in this school, in front of teachers and peers who weren't sure if I'd go far. Some of them thought I might not graduate high school, let alone start a successful company. But I'm here to tell you that no matter where you come from, no matter what anyone calls you, you can write your own story." He went on to share a bit about his struggles, his mother's unwavering belief in him, and the power of determination. As he spoke, he caught Miss S. Lancaster's eye, and she looked almost apologetic, perhaps recognizing how she had failed to see his potential back then. After the assembly, children swarmed around him, asking questions about running a business and if they too could do something big one day. Tyler answered each question enthusiastically, patting their shoulders, telling them they had to keep learning, keep believing in themselves. Miss S. Lancaster eventually approached him and said softly, Tyler, I think about the way I handled things back when you were in my class, and I realize I was too tired, too jaded, and too quick to judge. I'm sorry if I made you feel less than you are. Tyler took a breath, letting the moment stretch. He answered, Thank you for saying that. I made peace with it a long time ago. She nodded, looking grateful for his forgiveness. As he left the school, Tyler felt a sense of closure wash over him. In the years that followed, Local Connect's growth skyrocketed. They expanded internationally, partnering with small businesses in other countries, creating localized versions of the platform, bridging the gap between digital services and mom and pop shops that were the backbone of so many communities. Tyler found himself in the spotlight more often, giving keynote speeches, appearing on business magazine covers, interviewed by major networks. Each time, he'd speak candidly about his background, the adversity he faced, and his belief in the power of giving people a chance to rise above their circumstances. Some interviewers pressed him, How does it feel to be called a dumb black kid and then become a CEO? And he'd always respond, It feels like the ultimate proof that words only have the power you allow them to have, and that with perseverance, you can transform any negative label into fuel for success. Despite the fame and fortune, Tyler remained deeply rooted in his community. He started scholarship programs, funded after-school coding clubs, and visited schools in low-income neighborhoods to tell kids that nobody has the right to define their limits. He remembered meeting a 12-year-old girl named Asia in one such program, who shyly admitted she'd been told she wasn't smart enough to learn programming. Tyler knelt down to her eye level and said, If you want to learn, you absolutely can, then help set her up with a free online tutorial platform, checking in on her progress every few weeks. Over time, Asia's confidence grew, and she eventually started winning local coding competitions, beaming with pride as she told Tyler, You were right, I can do it. Moments like that became the lifeblood of Tyler's motivation. He recognized that while he couldn't single-handedly fix the systemic issues that perpetuated the cycle of prejudice and low expectations, he could at least spark hope in individuals, one child at a time. Years later, as Tyler stood on the stage of a massive auditorium filled with thousands of people, receiving an award for Entrepreneur of the Year, he couldn't help but reflect on the journey. Flashes of memory bombarded him, cowering in front of his third-grade classroom, hearing those insults, reading late into the night about civil rights leaders who refused to bow down, cramming for tests in high school just to prove Mr. Crane wrong, shaking with nerves as he pitched to Miss Warren, cheering with joy when Local Connect signed its 1,000th client, hugging his mum after buying her the house she never dreamed she could afford. As the audience applauded, he took a moment to gather himself before stepping to the microphone. His acceptance speech was short but poignant. To anyone who has been labeled something negative, to anyone who has felt the pain of low expectations, this award is for you. Don't let those labels define you. Use them to fuel you. Prove them wrong. Prove yourself right. Stand tall. Keep learning. Keep grinding. Keep believing. I stand here today, not just as a CEO, but as living proof that no matter what they call you, you decide what you become. Tears welled up in his eyes, and the audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation that seemed to last forever. In that moment, Tyler realized the label dumb black kid had lost all its power. It was nothing more than a ghost of the past, a reminder of the ignorance that once tried to hold him back, but ultimately propelled him forward. He was no longer bound by that cruel phrase. He had transcended it, turned it on its head, and used it to carve out a legacy of empowerment for himself and others. And somewhere, in the back of his mind, he could hear those old insults echoing for the last time, dissolving into the thunderous applause of the world that finally saw him for who he truly was, a visionary, a leader, a CEO, and so much more than any label could ever contain.